Okay, I think we are live. Hello, everyone. I hope all of you are being healthy and safe. Thank you so much for joining us today in the Heart and Hustle studio. I'm so honored today to be in virtual space with members of our LGBT and community organizers on the ground to really recognize Pride Month of our LGBTQ history nationwide and in Sacramento, but most importantly, uplifting members of our queer community. Again, I'm just so honored to be in space with all of you, and want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule again to be here today. And to really have a conversation about the work ahead of us and the work that all of you are doing every single day to ensure that we leave no one behind. Today, what I'm going to do really quick is introduce our panelists. At this moment, what we'll do is go around, and I would love for each and every one of you to introduce yourself, share your name, your title, your pronoun, and what organization you are part of. So with that, why don't we start? I'm going to counterclockwise. Why don't we start with Daniel?
Good afternoon, and thank you, Council Member Vang, for the invitation here, and happy Pride to everyone out there in Facebook land. My name is Daniel. My pronouns are he and elle. I am a bilingual licensed therapist, and I serve as the mental health coordinator with Sac City Unified's Connect Center here.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And Dee.
Hi, everyone. Happy Pride. My name is Dee. I use she and they pronouns, and I'm an organizer for Queer Shua.
Thanks so much, Dee. And Ray.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ray Vanderwerf. My pronouns are they and them, and I serve on the American River Flood Control Board as a trustee.
Thanks, Ray. And Jose.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jose Manuel. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm the Director of Health Services for the Sacramento LGBT Community Center.
Awesome. Thank you so much, y'all. Really appreciate y'all doing introduction. So again, just to all of you for making time out of your busy schedule to be us today. And so I'll start with this question. Each of you play a really critical role as leader with the work that you do. Y'all serve as not just role models, but models for our LGBTQ community, especially for our youth. Tell us a little bit about your work and how it's impacted your life and you wish others knew about being queer. That's the first question that I'm going to ask. And so why don't I start with Jose?
Okay. So a little bit about what we do at the LGBT Center. Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yes. Tell us a little bit about your work, how being part of the LGBTQ community has impacted your life, and what you wish others knew about being queer.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. So the work that I oversee our mental health department, our sexual health department, our legal services, bilingual, and community resources and referrals. So it's fundamental to have all of these sources within the LGBT community because it's so hard to find a doctor that is LGBTQ friendly or find a mental health therapist that resembles or understands what the LGBTQ people have to go through, what POC community has to go through. And then sexual health. We all see numbers go up on HIV, syphilis, and gonorrhea and chlamydia. So making sure that we have these services available, absolutely free, and at different times of the day and extended hours where we can help community and hopefully get to a world where we're ending this pandemic of HIV and making sure that community is safe. So that's the work that we oversee here, as well as our mental health, knowing that COVID was a big hit on all of our community. We launched our at-home HIV testing kits. We launched our mental health telehealth services, all free for the community. And we're adding so much more. So to me, this work is phenomenal. I love it. I've been in the LGBTQ movement for 8 years, and it's an honor to be part of the Sacramento LGBT Center and working to make Sacramento an LGBTQ place where all LGBTQ people can thrive.
Thanks, Jose. And we'll circle back because I definitely have some questions regarding how do we create the type of a healthy, safe environment for our queer community. So with that, Dee, would you like to answer that question? Tell us a little bit of your work. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm actually from the Midwest, and when I was living in the Midwest, I worked on like the marriage amendment, which happened in 2012. So I kind of started in the Midwest, but once I moved here to Sacramento, I actually didn't know anyone who was Hmong and LGBTQ. And so for me, I felt like it was important to have that space for Hmong LGBTQ. And I actually met this other queer person through council member Mai, and we created a space that was for Hmong and LGBTQ folks. And so since I'm not from here, I wanted to have that person who was actually from Sacramento to really show that, you know, there hasn't been a space like this. And so we met at a Starbucks, and I think it was December 5th, 2015 was when we created our first meetup. And there was actually 40 Hmong LGBTQ folks who came to our event. For the first time, it was like they got to meet each other and really see one another in the Sacramento region. And some folks were from like other areas like the Bay also came too. And so we created like this private Facebook group. We're still pretty active in talking to one another and meeting up and, you know, having socials. And yeah, so that's kind of like the work. It's just creating the visibility that's really needed, especially in the Hmong community that isn't seen as active as mainstream.
Yeah. Thanks, Dee, so much. And I know we'll dive right into, because we're going to talk about intersectionality. So really appreciate you being here today. Ray, what about you? Tell us a little bit about the work you've been doing and how has being part of the LGBT community impacted your life? And what do you wish others knew about being queer?
Yeah, I feel my position is a little different. Being an elected official,
Mhm.
my work doesn't always directly impact LGBTQ in the same way. A lot of it is more of an indirect because it's protecting levees, and directly, probably mostly, it impacts our unhoused neighbors. So that's a lot of the work we do is working on maintaining the levees, and we have to work with our unhoused neighbors who also use those levees for somewhere to live. Personally, as being a queer person, it's always, I think all of us will know, it's quite a journey. Being non-binary and trans has been quite a journey for myself, and just learning who I am and being able to figure that out. And I think, especially when you're younger, like I think like society is obviously getting so much better, and I hope that people continue to grow, and like as a society we are better at supporting our youth and like letting them be who they are, because I would have loved to maybe be my true self at a much younger age than having to kind of figure it out as an adult and feel very much that imposter syndrome that I feel very regularly as a femme non-binary person. I often feel like I don't belong and I don't have space. And I think it's important to know that you do. I wish that's something like people had told me, it's okay just to be you and not have to expect anyone else to accept you. As much as it's great to find those friends, you will find those friends, but definitely being understanding. Growing up in a more rural part of the state, I grew up about an hour and a half north of Sacramento, and so it wasn't very accepted to be queer, yet alone not like anything other than a boy or a girl. So just knowing that it's okay to be you, even if everyone around you doesn't quite get it, I think is something I wish I knew more as a kid.
Thanks so much, Ray. And Daniel, we're going to go to you. And I know you have to go soon because you have a PhD class that you have to go to. So I just want to say thank you again for being part of this. And I know you work at Sac City. So before you answer that question, I figured I would also just ask you this question just in case you have to leave. But, in addition to the question that I ask, every student in our city and in the nation, in the world, has a right to have a safe and supportive learning environment. And oftentimes we think of our schools as safe spaces, but we know too often that there are experiences of bullying, incidents of anti-LGBT discrimination across the country, right, and locally here, and lack of access to resources. And so my question to you is, with the role that you play at Sac City Unified School District, what services and support does Sac City Unified provide to ensure that our neighborhood schools can be safe and inclusive for our youth, for our queer youth?
Thank you. And that's a great question, Councilmember Vang, because what we know about youth and the research shows that LGBT youth are at higher risks and they're the most vulnerable because of those things like bullying, internalized homophobia, violence, and also not being accepted in their homes is one of the biggest barriers, especially for our young people out there. And just kind of how Ray described it earlier, when we were younger, maybe we wanted certain supports and services in our schools, in our communities. So at Sac City and the Connect Center, I look at the support services for our vulnerable youth and populations is that I really want to create the services and supports that are available for the students that probably weren't there for me or for you or for some others out there listening when we were younger because it was not accepting. So with our Connect Center, we really strive to provide all of those supports that we know that our young people out there in our schools and our communities need. And one thing that I also wanted to mention is that if we make our schools, communities safe for our LGBTQ plus population, what it means is it means an entire school climate that is safe and supportive for all students. And so that's our goal at the Connect Center. And what we do in order to is we know mental health support is critical and necessary. Like Jose mentioned, at the LGBT Center, they are now providing therapy at low cost to no minimal cost for individuals out there. So at Sac City, we really want to implement that to provide individual mentoring, case management, and support for our students. And so besides individual case management and support, we also know that training is critical for our educators, for our community, and for our administrators. So through our Connect Center, we provide direct safe zone training for all of our educators who request it at Sac City so that our teachers and educators provide a safe and inclusive space for our students. And in terms of our trans students and populations, we at the Connect Center take individual referrals for students. So students who are in the process of transitioning, students who are in the process of needing their name and gender updates created in our school system and their email, we provide direct case management and support to ensure that every buffer we can create for our students is in place.
Thanks, Daniel. That's super informative. Can I ask you also, like, are there anything right now, anything that that Sac City is working on right now? Any efforts that's underway that you are all pushing? Would love to know if there's anything in particular.
Oh, there is, and I love that you asked this question. So recently, we participated in California Department of Education webinar and training. There's a new assembly bill that's coming in place. It's A93. And so what AB 493 is hoping to do is to make it a requirement in our schools for students between the grades of 7 through 12 for that specific training that I talked about, for it to be a part of the curriculum, not just something that is added on. Because by providing this training, it's really specifying that the training is LGBTQ plus affirmative. So that's something that's really essential and important work that's occurring right now. And that's AB 493.
Awesome. 493, AB 493. So y'all heard it first here from Daniel if you don't know the bill, but definitely look into it. I think the advocacy piece is really critical. And Daniel, you touched on policy. So I'm going to go to the policy question because I think about building power for our most marginalized community is absolutely really important. At the end of the day, it's really about people power and organizing on the ground. I know that the news and what we've been seeing is that there are a lot of conservative politicians all over the country that they're developing and enacting policy designed really to target and oppress our trans and genderqueer community. So my question is really for all of you is, how do we support and uplift trans folks in Sacramento? And how can we help to refocus the national conversation? I don't know if I was just frozen, like it paused for a little bit. Did you hear me? You heard me. Okay, cool. So let me know if I need to repeat that question again. But really, I want to know from all of you, how do we support and uplift the type of policy work and really help us refocus the national conversation in a positive direction? So I'm going to leave that open. And if you're feeling the moment or the spirit to speak, feel free to chime in.
I'll chime in. As a trans individual myself, like it's honestly like seeing a lot of it is like making sure that you are like being supportive of those people, and if like and just organizations and just any kind of cause that you're seeing that is specifically supporting trans individual, and especially trans youth right now, because they are just being completely attacked all over. Even if it's like they're not being attacked directly here in California, we are much safer. That doesn't mean we don't feel unsafe. And so I think like making sure that you are just being supportive either by checking in on people. That's like, if you have friends, just check in on them. Like they might seem okay, but they're probably having struggles internally because of all this being brought up. And I think like making sure that where there are programs at the schools, like reaching out to the schools and seeing what you can do to help more, or seeing like if there's youth programs or specific programs helping unhoused youths, like specifically getting out there and helping them. I think that will make the biggest differences. Overall conversation, talking to people, if you know anyone who doesn't understand it, being kind of a resource and giving them someone to talk to, because a lot of times people are just confused, and I often get lots of questions where people just don't understand. And it's nice if I don't have to do the explaining. It's nice if maybe an ally to a trans person can do the explaining instead, where it's not always falling on trans individuals to be our own like support systems for that.
Thanks, Ray. Other folks, would you like to chime in?
I would chime in the way of being an accomplice. So there's an ally and being an accomplice. Ally, you know, and what's going on and everything. But accomplice, what are you doing? So open those doors up. You are at a table, a committee, and you don't see a trans voice there. Say, hey, we need to make some room here. We need a trans voice here. Share their story. Make some space. It's a different perspective. It's a different. That our community will be able to feel seen and heard if we make space. So being an accomplice, ally is good, accomplice is A+.
Thanks, Jose. You just shared a little bit about, having a voice at the table, or recognizing those who are not at the table. And that leads to my next question, really about representation, right? And how important that is, and how important it is that we need more LGBTQ elected officials who can be our collective voice. I think one of the most difficult barriers to increasing political power is really convincing Black, Brown, Indigenous, LGBT people that they are qualified to run for office. And study shows that oftentimes women or LGBTQ folks often underestimate their own abilities and assume that they are less qualified than other candidates. So Ray, this question is directed to you because you're an elected official. Wanted to ask you, what advice would you give someone from the queer community who is considering running for office?
So from like the honest like truth, you're qualified. It's not like if you live in the district and you care, you are more than qualified to run for that office. And don't let anyone tell you anything else. Don't let someone be like, well, you need to do this step and this step. That's not what qualifies you. Being qualified is about caring, is about being passionate, and about being you. Like, we do need more representation, and it is scary. I know I had to get asked, I think there was 8 people who asked me before I really was like, okay, I can do this. And I understand it is scary, and there's nothing wrong with also asking your friends to support you and like kind of checking in, like, what do you guys think? But it really is about like, if you know what you can help serve your community and that you're needed, do it. Like, that's honestly what it is. You're all if you want to run and you live in the district, you're qualified. There's a few exceptions. There's a couple of like special positions. Like I know like DA, you have to be a lawyer. So like other than ones that with very specific qualifications, but any other one, flood board, city council, school board, parks boards, any of those, you're qualified. If you live in the district, you're qualified. And I think that's something that's really not said enough. And I think like, and honestly, reaching out to other elected officials, if you want advice, especially those of us who are queer. I know there's not a lot of us, but we're here and we're definitely want to support you and want to see more of your voices coming to the tables. So that's some of the advice, is also just reaching out to people.
Thanks, Ray. No, really appreciate that insight, because we definitely need more representation at City Hall, at our school board, at all levels of government. And it's really great to have you as a trustee on one of the boards. So just want to say thank you so much for your leadership and your heart and your hustle. The next question I have is for Dee. Dee, even as a community organizer, I've been thinking a lot about just intersectionality and really the intersection of identities for Black, Brown, Indigenous, and being LGBT, and I think about myself just as a cis straight woman of color. I know that it's really important to look at, policy or our lived experience through a really intersectional lens, because I do believe that it really, challenges us to think about all of the layers of barriers, the layers of our identities, of systems and structures of inequity, right, in our system. And so I want to ask you in particular, as co-founder of Mon Queer Choix, how would you share, in what ways has Mon Queer Choix been able to serve our Mon Queer siblings through the lens of intersectionality?
That's a great question. So I think within Mon Queer Choix, one of our main focus is really to be visible and having that visibility, because, within our own community, it's very tight knit. Everyone knows everyone, and just being there and just being like, hey, I'm queer, and then like other folks like talking to other folks like, hey, I have a cousin or a gay nephew, things like that. Like hearing those things like really shows visibility and comfortability, right? And how do we connect those folks to Mon Queer Choix? Because for us, we're also working on building resources for folks. Like what kind of resources do you need? I think that one of the resources that I want to pursue, like in the future, is really talking to parents, because there's a lot of need for that. Like I feel like there's a lot of need in our community for parents, because they don't know how to navigate the language already, because there's no language for LGBTQ. Like we just basically come out in phrases, and so like how do we navigate that for them? And I'm gonna give some tips, because I feel like it might be helpful as like an ally who knows like another LGBTQ person. I feel like one of the tips is to really be subtle about your support for them. Like don't come out and say like, and don't out them either. So that's another thing. Do not out them. It's more like being subtle, like, hey, you want to go to this pride event with me? Like showing that kind of support, so that person knows that you have their back as as an ally. And so those are things that I've seen and I feel like are helpful for folks, especially in the Hmong community. Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. Really appreciate that. And I know in space in the conversation, right, there's also that cultural piece too, and the language piece. And so when we think about intersectionality, it's all of those types of lived experience through your identities, right? And really appreciate Mon Queer Choix holding that space for our Southeast Asian siblings, queer community. So thank you so much. I want to ask Jose this question. We've been in this pandemic for over a little year now. And I know I represent the zip code with the highest cases of COVID, not just in the city, but in the county. And so Team Heart and Hustle worked really hard to get a vaccination clinic in the heart of South Sacramento, really making sure that we get folks vaccinated so that, you know, we can, like now you're seeing, we can hug our loved ones again, and our local minority businesses and spaces of convening are starting to open up. And so my question is really around health, because, and especially because you're the Director of Health Services at the Sacramento LGBT Center. And I also just want to give a quick shout out that Jose actually works at the South Sac location at the Marshall P. Johnson Center South, which is located on Mack and Stockton. So I want to give a shout out to that because I represent South Sacramento and want to make sure that folks know who the Director of Health Services is at that location. So wanted to ask you, well, one, we know that the COVID pandemic has had serious implications on the mental health and well-being of LGBT individuals. And I also know that LGBT folks, you know, they face not just many health inequities due to discrimination, but also systemic denial of their civil and human rights. And so I want to ask you, Jose, you know, in your role as the Director of Health Services, what do you think it will take to ensure that we are creating a city and a region where LGBTQ health and wellness can thrive? What do you think it will take?
A lot of education and a lot of support from our accomplices and allies. So what we see a lot in communities is when they're afraid to go to any doctor's office and they have to pick, oh, male or female. And it's not inclusive. The paperwork's not inclusive. You know, you have your legal name, but then preferred name, preferred pronouns. Make your health center or your office welcoming. Be part of the LGBT Center's Pride Festivality, sponsor this, sponsor that. I think those are some steps to take. Some educational training. Ask your medical facility, hey, have we done any cultural sensitivity training for LGBTQ? Like, let's learn about that. Let's learn about what's the proper vocabulary or how to help the LGBTQ community. So many, those are big barriers for the LGBT community. They want to go to a doctor, a physician, a pharmacy, a dentist, any medical field that is LGBTQ friendly, that they feel safe. They're able to be themselves and no judgment. So I think education would be a big part. Where here at the LGBT Center, we have Alexis, who is our advocacy and training. And she has been working hard and advocating and training a lot of companies, businesses, and medical facilities how to treat LGBTQ people, how to conversate, how to have a growing, steady relationship.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And Danielle, I know you have to log off, so I'm also going to direct that question to you, right? Because you work with our youth directly. Wanted to just ask you really quickly before you log off, because you got 2 minutes, is, you know, what do you think it will take to truly create a safe, healthy environment for our young queer community, our students?
And thank you for having me here for this this talk. It was amazing. More time. But one thing that I will say, it does take a village. It takes a strong collective and collaborative, just like we're here today talking about what we could be doing, and then putting those voices together with different ideas and input to impact the system, to change what's not working, and to also have the voices of everyone concerned. And on that note, I will kind of a shout out, because one of the things that I really want to do is I want to, starting next year, pull together all of our local school districts together to provide an inclusive space where we could talk about the needs of youth, what they need, and how we could make schools supportive and safe. So if anybody is interested in joining a regional and eventually state LGBTQ plus school collaborative, reach out to me. I know my email will probably be listed here. We are already working with San Francisco's Unified School, San Diego, Fresno, and a couple of other school districts. So we're looking for more members. Feel free to reach out to me, and I hope you join our collective.
That's awesome, Daniel. And I also plug in our CBOs too, right? Because oftentimes our CBOs are working with our most vulnerable youth. And so if y'all are watching this, definitely plug in. We'll make sure to share Daniel's contact as well. He have to run right now to class. So, but Daniel, thank you so much. We're about to finish soon too. We have a few more questions, but I just want to say thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. And thank you all. See you soon.
All right, Daniel, thank you. So with that, really quick, I have one more question, and then we'll close it up. We are in the month of June, and it is Pride Month. And so the last question that I have for each and every one of you is, how can we continue to celebrate, recognize, and uplift our LGBT community? I know we're celebrating Pride Month this month, but how do we continue this work and the celebration and this collaborative work all year round, right? While we're recognizing and respecting the deeply radical and activist and the roots of the gay liberation movement. And so I want to ask each and every one of you, how can individuals who are watching this right now really continue this work, and that we're not just celebrating Pride just in one month, but we're doing it all year around. So with that, we'll go counterclockwise to me. We'll go with Ray first.
Thank you. And thank you, Mai, for hosting this. This has been great. It's been really great to see everyone and being able to hear all these really great questions. I want to kind of also mention something off of that Dee mentioned that I think is really important, is not outing people. As someone who is non-binary trans, I actually have a lot of people who accidentally out other trans people to me because they think it's okay. And it's something you should really consider if you're being an ally or an accomplice, which I love that word, that it's really someone's own personal right to decide who knows who they are. And as much as we, as if you are either an ally or just another queer person, want to support those people, it's also about giving them the space to do it on their own and really be able to do that. So I think that's something year round you can be really cognizant about, not outing people and being a strong supporter of that individual, and just being there for them. I also think making sure that you get out when you see if there's events you can support, or try to do mentoring, or just make sure that people also know you're a safe space. If you are a teacher or you work in a space, even a big office, just making sure that people know that you're also safe to be around. I know that helps me a lot in my office space, knowing which people are safe and are going to be respectful of my pronouns, or if I'm having someone being really kind of not great with my pronouns, I know who I can kind of go to maybe, if they're in a room, they can help support me versus me always having to correct someone. So just knowing, being out there and open, especially if you're an accomplice. I'm using that from, I love that. That's a great way to be an accomplice, is instead of making the person correct, you can do it, because it's taking away the energy that that individual might have to spend. I think those are important takeaways, but also just continuing that work nationwide and locally, helping our school districts. There's always different things that they're trying to better their policies, or even just bettering your policies at work, being someone who steps up and is hey, I noticed this was really not good. We're making everyone use a legal name instead of ensuring people who maybe haven't had that ability to change their name can use the name that is their name. And so I think that just being able to find little spaces, even if you don't think you have that much power, I promise you, there's a spot you can make a change and a difference that will help really impact someone else's life.
Thanks so much, Ray. Super insightful. Really appreciate you sharing that tip and that advice. Jose, what about you? How can we continue to celebrate Pride Month, not just in June, but all year around, and really recognizing and uplifting the work of our LGBT queer siblings and community? What advice do you have?
I'll echo a little bit on Ray, what they were saying, and also volunteering. Volunteer at the LGBT Center, volunteer at other LGBTQ places, and just be part of it. If you see at school that there's no GSA, try to talk with a teacher or the principal and try to start one there. At your company or business, if there's not a resource group, an LGBTQ resource group, start one or be part of it, volunteer and join. Like Ray mentioned, creating safe spaces and places, and be part of the community. So I think that, because that's what we need. The LGBT community needs more safe places. We need to know what places and areas we can be ourselves. And when we see that, we feel welcome. We feel our authentic self. The unfortunate aspect of these safe places is that they're being under attack by shootings, by hate crimes. Hate crimes have been going up in our Lavender Heights area, and this is a safe place neighborhood that we're trying to cultivate. So, you know, if you see something, report it. If you see somebody getting bullied or harassed, stand up and help out. Just be a helping hand. That's what the LGBT community needs. And until we get to full equality for everybody, it's helping everybody where we can.
Thank you so much, Jose. And Dee, what about you?
I think for me, my thoughts are kind of like everywhere, but
All right, yeah.
yeah, I think for me, in terms of like the history of Pride, it's very important for folks to like look up and, you know, understanding why is Pride, right? I find that like the history is very important for folks to really look up and understand like the reasonings of Pride and why it started, and that's for another thing. The other thing is I think that it's important for like organizations to be really culturally responsive in terms of like knowing their community, like knowing community and how they can support other communities of colors, because it's really important that we uplift those voices, especially people of color, and what's been happening within their communities. Just like the Hmong community, right? I always find that there's a struggle there to really understand what's going on in the mainstream. And then there's also like within conflicts too. And how do we support one another's opinions, but also how do we move forward in being culturally responsive? So yeah, I would say that that's like a way to really think about Pride and really have pride for that.
Yeah, Dee, thank you so much. And you're absolutely right, right? I think it's really important for us to remember and acknowledge that our first Pride was a protest against police violence, right? Led by people of color, and in particular, Black trans members of the LGBTQ community. I think it's important for us to understand the history of that. That Pride was so much more. It was a protest. It was resistance against police violence. So I really appreciate you bringing that up as we close out here to really know history, right? Know history, know self, to understand really how Pride came about. And so with that, I just really want to say I'm just so grateful to each and every one of you for joining us today, and reminding us that we have to continue the fight in their honor, right? Those who fought before us, by really uniting our advocacy efforts under an intersectional umbrella, right? And I think that's really important because oftentimes, even in LGBT spaces, mainstream spaces, may not be safe for our Black trans folks, for our Hmong folks, for our Vietnamese, for our Latinx folks, right? And so really thinking about that in particular, and really to help to ensure that we leave no one behind in our community, and that our fight is still happening now, right? Our modern day fights for racial and LGBT justice in this country is still happening. And this movement is really built on the shoulders of these change makers. And so again, and you all as well, that all of y'all are doing incredible work in the community, and just so grateful for your leadership and your heart and hustle, and making time to be in the Heart and Hustle studio. So I just want to say thank you so much, Ray, Jose, and Dee, and Daniel, who had to leave earlier, but just thank you so much for the great work that all of you do. Lastly, what I also want to share, I think Ryan has a slide that we wanted to share as well, so that you can learn more about each of the, a link. Okay, Ryan just said not a slide, but a link. So if you go to myving.org/pride, you'll get information from our panelists and how can you get in contact with them and their organization. So if you want to learn more about Mon Shua, about Ray, about Jose and the great work that he is doing as the Director of Health Services, and the great work that Daniel is leading on the ground in our neighborhood schools, please check it out, myving.org/pride. And with that, I think that is it. Again, I just want to say thank you so much to all of you. Happy Pride if you're watching this. And let's not just celebrate and uplift our queer community, not just in June, but every single month, and that we are proactive in doing this work. And so with that, I'm signing off. But again, sending lots of love and healing. Also going to put a quick plug that we have our vaccination clinic every Friday weekly from 9 to 11 in the heart of South Sacramento in Meadowview. So make sure you stop by if you know a loved one, neighbors that still need their shot. Please swing by the Pinnell. We do walk-ins, and it's our longest standing community clinic in the city of Sacramento. We've planned to have this clinic until November because we know we still have a long ways to go. So with that, make sure all of y'all are taking care of yourself, sending lots of love and healing. And thank you so much to our panelists for joining us. And we'll see all of y'all again at our next month live chat. And just a quick primer, we're going to be talking about water. It's July, it's hot, and I'm on the water committee. So if you want to know where our water comes from, everything about drought, we're going to be doing that next month. So tune in and look out for the dates for that. So signing off, and happy Pride to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks, everyone.